right, thank you for joining us today. I am using the component of music to relate to our lecture, focusing on the 4 sentence types. This does go with page 57 to 59 in your reader. It is part of our Unit 1 grammatical and writing concepts. You will be responsible for knowing the 4 sentence types and employing them in your first essay and on quiz number 1. For our presentation today, some vocabulary to know is rhythm. And you could just hear that example through music in the background. But that is a variation of a pattern. For example, you might have 2 claps and 1 long silence. Or you might have 3 claps, 2 claps, 3 claps, 2 claps. Number 2, a clause, a subject and a verb, can be independent and stand on its own sentence as its own. For example, the egg broke. The egg is the subject and the verb is break, past tense, broke, followed by a period. Or can be a dependent clause, which means it relies on an independent clause to be complete. Number 3, phrase. Now this is a group of words that cannot stand as a complete sentence. For example, to the movies. Then we could see that's a prepositional phrase. There's no subject-verb pair in that group of words. Number 4, redundant, which means too repetitive. It does have a negative meaning. So there's too much repetition, too much, continuing on and on and on without any variation. Redundant. Number 5, a concept to know, is Easter eggs. This is a figurative expression for our purposes, which are hidden questions given to the audience in the middle of a lecture to check for reception and comprehension. Also exists as a decorated Easter egg during the Easter holiday. All right, and as you listen, be prepared to note the answers to the Easter egg questions mentioned within the presentation. So knowing that, let's take a look at our first Easter egg question. Number 1, I. Which of these words is a synonym? It's the same meaning, and that means repetitive. A, B, C, or D. And 2, is that word typically used in a positive or negative way? Take a quick second and write down your answer to our first Easter egg. Welcome back. One of the ways to avoid redundancy in your writing is to use a variety of sentence types, and these can be called the 4 sentence types. The first sentence type is known as a simple sentence, and if we zoom in close, you can see it's composed of a subject and a verb. The second is a compound, the third is a complex, and the fourth is compound complex sentence. Good writers compose effective academic and professional writing similar to the ways that a great musical composer composes a beautiful piece of music. For example, a composer may decide they want to use 4th notes, they call them quarter notes, and then maybe 3 quarter notes in a row, and then 1 long note. For example, a quarter note could just simply be this, and a whole note, or 4 of those, would count for 1, 2, 3, 4. If we tie it into writing, you can see that a simple sentence has a subject and a verb. So it's short, or it has the potential to be short. It's composed of 1 independent clause. It can have multiple subjects and or multiple verbs, but can only have 1 clause that's independent. So if we look at a couple examples, simple sentence here, the subject is I, and the verb is flew. To Japan is the prepositional phrase. Last summer is the adverbial phrase of time. However, in that first pair, you have a subject and a verb, and that counts as an independent, meaning it can stand on its own clause. Now, why do we need, that's an E. Why do we need variety in our writing? Why is it more interesting that way? Well, imagine a piece of music. If you had a piece of music that only had 8th notes, it might be too redundant. So I'm going to refer to the American writer Gary Provost, who once said this. He wrote a passage, and the first 5 lines are all simple, very repetitive. They're boring. There's no variation. There's 5 words in each sentence. It's droning. It sounds like a stuck record. But in his second paragraph, he expands to this. Now listen. I vary the sentence length and I create music. Music. The writing sings. It has a pleasant rhythm, a lilt, a harmony. I use short sentences and I use sentences of medium length. And sometimes when I am certain the reader is rested, I will engage him with a sentence of considerable length, a sentence that burns with energy and builds with all the impetus of a crescendo, the roll of drums, the crash of the cymbals, sounds that say, listen to this, it is important. So write with a combination of short, medium, and long sentences. Create a sound that pleases the reader's ear. Don't just write words, write music. And you can see he's using yellow highlight to indicate a very short sentence, purple a little bit longer, green a little bit longer than the purple, and then blue standing for the longest sentence, which we'll talk about in a few minutes and our terminology. So that brings us up to our second Easter egg question. What does the speaker relate composing a variety of sentences to? Take a guess. Welcome back. We're looking at our second sentence type, compound sentence. It's two or more independent clauses joined together with fanboys, also known as coordinating conjunctions. They can go subject plus verb semicolon, which is a punctuation mark that functions kind of like a period, transition word, and then another subject and a verb, but our more common structures typically look like this. You've got an independent clause up here with a subject and a verb, one independent clause, comma, coordinating conjunction, and subject plus verb. Notice there's a comma that separates those two independent clauses. Yes, you can start an independent clause with a coordinating conjunction. And I wanted to take a look at what does that even mean? What are the purposes of coordinating conjunctions? Well, coordinators, connecting words, conjunctions, they join two independent clauses or clauses that are basically showing relationships between ideas or events, okay? One more time. Coordinators show connections between ideas and events. For introduces a cause, and introduces addition, nor means and not, but means opposition, or means choice. Yet actually means the same thing as but when it's functioning as a conjunction, coordinating conjunction, and so introduces a result, okay? And we use the acronym fanboys to stand for what those words are to help us remember them. But we use them in compound sentences, okay? Moving on to our question, our next Easter egg question, which is, let me get to it. Here it is. A compound sentence contains how many independent clauses? Take a guess, and we'll be right back. All right, I hope you were able to come up with a solid solution for this Easter egg question. I do want to look at a couple examples of compound sentences, so I'm just going to scroll down to our examples here, looking at a couple of them. Letter C, music is fun, and I like dancing to it. We got the subject is music, the verb is. That is my first independent clause. Again, independent clause means it can stand on its own as a sentence. Follow it with a very important punctuation mark, a comma, then your coordinating conjunction. Sometimes they say fanboys, followed by a subject and a verb. But guess what? This whole piece here is another independent clause. And then we have a compound sentence, compound meaning two or more. Let's look at letter E. It says, he loves tea. So we've got my subject and a verb, semicolon, transition word, comma, subject, verb, and yep, we got two independent clauses. Our second one starts with however and ends with often, and our first one starts with he and ends with tea. So again, you've got two compound sentences. All right, let's move on to our third sentence type, the complex sentence. This might be familiar to you if you've studied sentence structure before, but follow along. A complex sentence is an independent clause and a dependent clause, joined together with a SWABI, which is an acronym as well. We'll look at it in just a minute, also known as a subordinating conjunction. So you got a independent clause, which is your subject plus verb. You do not need a comma to separate that from the dependent clause if the dependent clause comes second, followed with your subordinator, then a subject, then a verb. If I look down at what are my subordinating conjunctions, the most commonly used ones are since, when, while, whereas, although, though, even though, because, and if. And if this material is new to you, you can take a look at page 59 in our reader, and it does have a list of those subordinators and what they mean. You can see that if is a condition, because is cause, although is contrast, as it does also have those coordinators that we talked about. But the beauty of connecting words is they show relationship between ideas, okay? So let's look at a couple examples of complex sentences. We're looking at sentence F. I will let you know the answer when we finish the lesson. So we've got when is the subordinating conjunction, I, subject, will let verb, we is our another subject, finish is our verb. Let's break it down now. We've got our independent clause starting from I to answer, and we have our dependent clause going from when to lesson. This I'm just going to mark is an IC. That's an independent clause. And this is a DC, dependent clause. It depends on the independent clause in order to exist. Okay, so let's take a look at our next Easter egg. Why do we use connecting words such as fanboys and swabbies? Take a second and jot down your answer. All right, I hope you were able to come up with something solid for this one. We will be going over the answers at our next meeting. But so let's look at our final sentence type. We're ending with, I should say, a compound complex sentence. So we use a compound complex sentence for which it is three or more clauses joined together with coordinators such as coordinating conjunctions, check, subordinating conjunctions, check, and transition words, also known as FAMOs. So these are the transition words most commonly used. Therefore, introduces a result. However, introduces a contrast. It's kind of like but. Additionally and also like and, introduces addition. Moreover means and on top of that. And then on the other hand is introducing opposition. Okay. Again, if you decide you wanted to look into our book, you can see on page 59, we've got our commonly used transition words here. You can stop and pause it if you want to study and look at the other ones, but our most common ones are therefore, however, additionally, and also. What is the structure? We've got subject plus verb, comma, coordinating conjunction. So a fanboy, subject plus verb, subordinating conjunction, so a swabby, and then another subject and a verb. So you've got two independent clauses right here, and then you've got one dependent clause right here. So you got 1, 2, and 3. So compound complex sentence, 3 or more clauses joined together with coordinators. To take a look at an example to close out, and sentence H reads, if I went to Oakland, I would attend a rock concert and I would play with cats at the cat cafe. So we've got my subordinating conjunction if, subject verb, and there is my dependent clause. Then you've got a subject. You've got a verb phrase starting with the modal would and base verb form attend. You've got a comma. You've got your fanboys and, that is my coordinating conjunction. And then you've got a subject, and then you've got another verb structure, would play. So how many clauses do we have? Let's count them. Here's our first dependent clause. There's 1. Our second one here. And our third one is here. So compound complex. You've got a compound sentence functioning here, and you've got your complex sentence functioning there. And we have sentence I here because Jennifer's talent is animation. She is majoring in the subject, but she enjoys painting as well. You've got your complex sentence and you've got your compound sentence. So thank you so much. And I hope you see the connection between writing and music.